The Chicago Bulls finally made the call in hiring Bryson Graham as their next president of basketball operations. This is the guy who's going to lead the Chicago Bulls, hopefully, to a new, more successful era. And while this is not the pick that was labeled as the favorite in Matt Lloyd, I think there's a lot here with Bryson Graham. We're going to talk about why he's ready for the job, some lazy narratives that are around this job that have already popped up in just the few hours that he's had the job. Plus, we're going to talk about how this changes the Chicago Bulls head coaching search and the candidates that Bryson Graham could take a look at. We're talking about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Terry Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to start this off by first, of course, by now, everybody knows the Chicago Bulls finally hired their new executive vice president of basketball operations. That is Bryson Graham. And so he's going to replace Arturas Karnisovas as the top decision maker with the Chicago Bulls. And reportedly, via Casey Johnson, he's going to have the latitude to change this job as he needs to. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the future structure. But this hire did come as a bit of surprise by Bulls fans because Matt Lloyd has been viewed as the front runner for probably about a week now in regards to that one. Of course, Bryson Graham was one of the guys that was listed amongst the initial executives of Matt Lloyd, Dennis Lindsey, Mike Gansey, Dave Philippe. Eventually, Dave Lewin was added to that as well. This does feel like a new direction for the Chicago Bulls, right? Like, one of the things that you'll have, and this kicks me into what I want to talk about, some of the lazy narratives. And I got to shout out to my boy, Doug Tonis, the podcast OG when it comes to Bulls podcasting. He put out a tweet shortly after this that talked about some of the narratives that have already popped out. And I agreed with basically all of them because, it was very poignant and it was very on top of what you kind of see from Chicago Bulls fans in regards to it, right? So let's take a look at it, right? When you get into some of the narratives that are automatically around this hire is that the Bulls cheaped out, and I get it why the Bulls have that moniker. I get why some people responded to that, but I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is that just like everybody else who was here, Bryson Graham was at the same level as executive as all those guys, and so there's nothing here to say that the Bulls quote unquote cheaped out. And this is where it gets into some of my personal problems, and you guys know I talk about you guys all the time in this one, is that sometimes some Bulls fans, I'm not saying all Bulls fans, I'm not saying everybody, because there are some legitimate cases of why people could look at this and say, well, damn, I felt like X was a stronger candidate. I felt like B was a stronger candidate, right? So I'm not saying in that one. But I'm saying that the fact is that people have this lazy thing in regards to thinking, oh, everything that the Bulls do, because it doesn't fit in with the common narrative that was pushed, the rumors that were pushed, right? And like I said in my video that I broke the news on is that, guys like Joe Cowley, right, who very much toot their own horn when they're right. And shout out to him. He called the AK firing about an hour before it happened, whatever was there, right? But then then because of guys like him, me, myself, everybody talked about Matt Lloyd being the front runner. For so many Bulls fans, they locked in on that. And the thing that I've noticed in being in this community and sitting in this chair at this job for so long is that so many Bulls fans will take what's publicly pushed as a rumor or the narrative, and that becomes their opinion. And the moment that it's anything other than that, they automatically meet it as it has to be this huge negative because it didn't match with what their hopes and thoughts got into in some of the media narratives that went around. And this is why a couple of episodes ago I said, hey, right now, even if this wasn't, if Matt Lloyd ends up not being high, you got to keep in mind, this is all speculation based off what people are hearing, but things can change, right? So anybody that's automatically going to, oh, well, they must have got Bryson Graham for cheap, you're being lazy in your narratives, right? That's just ridiculous in that. When you look at it as well, like when you, and even the cheap part of it, like it's a lazy narrative when it comes down to this team, right? And then also the part that people, that act like, oh my God, the Bulls did something so different. They went outside the family. I talked about this on this show so often. Guess what? Acme was outside the family. Mark Eversley and Arturas Karnisovas did not have ties to the Chicago Bulls organization. And it's funny because some of the same people that were complaining about Matt Lloyd, getting the job because of his familiarity with John Paxson, which reportedly it came out as well that Paxson initially wanted to remove himself from the interview with Matt Lloyd because of the familiarity that they have with themselves, but ownership wanting him in on that meeting. So again, Bulls already doing something different. This is not the same thing that the Bulls have done before, right? So that's another lazy narrative in regards to it also. In regards to, Matt Lloyd turning the job down. It's already been reported Matt Lloyd did not turn the job down. This is not a situation where the job was turned down. He wanted this job. The Bulls decided to go with Bryson Graham. They listened to the pitch of Bryson Graham and hired him for that. So that's the first thing that we want to clear out, the lazy narratives, because that's something that's going to pop up. It pops up all the time with Chicago Bulls fans. It's just part of it. And like I've said before, I get why. I'm not saying this is not a situation where I'm saying I don't understand why the narrative pops up. Ownership is on that. But I want to clear it from this one. So that's one. Now, what is the things that Bryson Graham does well? Graham has a strong reputation as a talent evaluator. One of the key guys in the Pelicans, drafting guys like Trey Murphy III, who's really damn good. Herb Jones, who's not a star-level player, but a really good player on that team. Acquiring Jose Alvarado. Getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker to the Atlanta Hawks. Drafting what they've done here. Fleecing the Atlanta Hawks in that trade. Coming in and understanding right away that they had to move on from Trae Young and build around Jalen Johnson. More on that here in a second, right? But when you look at his history of scouting, his history of acquisition and wins in acquisitions like that, all that stuff stands out. And so you got to talk about that one. His resume includes those guys of evaluating Dyson Daniels, Trey Murphy III, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jose Alvarado, like we talked about, drafting Zion Williamson, who, is hurt a lot. So take that for what you will, right? And so when you look at the misses that AK had here, a big part of what set the Chicago Bulls back is misevaluation of certain draft picks, namely Dalen Terry instead of Walker Kessler, right? That's one that stands out. The Patrick Williams evaluation. You got to see Patrick Williams up close, which he was on the team with Devin Vassell, and you decided on Patrick Williams, right? Who's the better player now? Not to mention all the other players that went after Patrick Williams. So that's the thing that you're trying to look in regards to this. And now when he's coming into a situation, right, when you have somebody that can identify talent, you have 2 top 15 picks in this draft, 3 top 38 selections in this draft. So the scouting eye that Bryson Graham has is going to be needed, and we're going to lean on that right away for the Chicago Bulls, right? And so what I think this says about the Chicago Bulls' future is that this, in my personal opinion, kind of signifies a slower, more draft-focused rebuild of this team. Not to say that they're not going to make some key acquisitions. Again, you look at what the Atlanta Hawks did. They just, look at their free agency. Getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a player who was a 6th man who came in and now has averaged over 20 points per game this season and still gave really good defense. So I still expect them to make strategic acquisitions to this team. Could that still be Peyton Watson? Could that still be Ben Mathurin? We'll end up seeing in regards to that. But it's not just about the draft focus. He's a good evaluator of talent, right? So with that rebuild, Graham's younger age, right, in the profile that a more modern developmental executive, he's going to fit into that as well. And so, with that, you're going to see that this could mean patience, flexibility, building talent through younger talent through the draft, rather than a quick turnaround and a quick fix is probably going to be the path here. Now, there are going to be some things that can naturally accelerate it, right? I think if you make the right acquisition, it can accelerate it. If you make the right draft pick, it can accelerate that too. So you're looking at those type of things for the Chicago Bulls, and I think that's really good when you want to look at all of that, right? I also think that you have to go into this and realize nobody on the Chicago Bulls roster is going to be safe long term. I'm not saying that he's going to come in and year one trade Josh Giddey or anything like that. A new executive is going to want to evaluate and build their own vision. That does not mean that pieces that are on this roster still can't fit. For example, I talked about Bryson Graham. One of the things that he came in within his first 2 years on the job is realize, hey, we need to change this build. We have to build around Trae Young. We got to move on. But in that as well, he was able to build the team around a piece that was already there in Jalen Johnson. So what's those 2 things tell us about Bryson Graham? He understands who he wants to build with on a roster, and he also understands how a roster needs to fit together for you to get to that success. So if things that he's building, Josh Giddey and Montes Buzelis fit in, great. No, SNG too. If they, Leonard Miller, all those guys, if they fit in, great. But I think that also means that you're not going to, if they don't, you could see them move within a couple of years, depending on the shape that this roster wants to take, right? And that's something that's going to be told over time. You look at Atlanta's roster, it's not like they had a whole bunch of turnover, right? Now, they were in the playing area right along with the Bulls. They've been able to accelerate outside of that now. So now you have to see what does that mean for the Chicago Bulls part of it, right? Who does he evaluate on this roster? Modest, Noah, Josh Giddey, Trey Jones, Jalen Smith, Leonard Miller, right? These are the players that are under roster here that, we could, Rob Dillingham, also under contract as well. So, evaluating that talent, I think that Bryson Graham's going to come in, and it's not going to take much to really get that done. But I do think that with this first draft that he has here and having 2 picks in the top 15, he's going to have his guys very early on. Does he build with his guys and want to change the mode of the team with that? Or does he see enough in the bones of this team to where he wants to build with that, right? So I think that the current young players are going to have to show that they fill in with where the Bulls are going. I think that's fine, right? A clear standard, I think, for who stays, who develops, who gets moved, that's going to be established here over the first year. And then we start seeing more, follow-up actions to that as we go on. But look at that being the first year here for Bryson Graham, right? And so Casey Johnson did report that Bryson Graham is going to have the leeway and resources to build the front office as he sees fit. We've talked about the Bulls going into a non-traditional, front office format based off what they've already had. We're going to see how that ends up working out. It's good to hear that he's going to have that decision, right? But he does have ties to names like Brian Hagan, J.J. Polk, right, from his New Orleans Pelicans days to where he can bring those guys in maybe as his GM, right? Historically, the Chicago Bulls have kept a smaller front office, but it seems like now he's going to have the resources to really have those guys there. I think this hire could force the Chicago Bulls to modernize how they run their team, and we'll see what he goes into that. Graham knows what he does really well, right? And he hires around what he feels he needs and the franchise needs. That could be one of the best parts of this move overall, right? I think that's the thing that you're looking at there. So when you look at this, there are a couple of things that I want to stand out that I think is going to be really important that Bryson Graham's going to have to do here in what he's going to have to hire, right? A, he's a good talent evaluator. Love that. He understands how to build with pieces that are already here and also understands when to move off pieces that don't fit the direction that he sees the fit team going, right? I think his management of the cap situation in Atlanta and with New Orleans for the time that he was there, he's done that very well. That's going to be an important part here because the Bulls don't go over the luxury tax. They do live above the salary cap, though, and we're going to have to see what's going to happen in regards to that. So I think when you look at things that are coming down the pipeline for this team, talent evaluation is the first, right? You got to evaluate the talent, not only that you bring in here this summer, but some of the ones that were already here. Do they bring in a developmental head coach? More on that here in a second. Or do they bring in a kind of more proven commodity? And then the staff, right? Those are the things that you're looking at here. No one's safe for the Chicago Bulls team, and we're going to see how things move forward going. But like I said, what he did in Atlanta, he came in, he recognized the pieces that were on that roster that fit. He also had some key veterans around those guys, and it could be a similar build here where guys like Trey Jones, Jalen Smith, those guys are going to see what happens with those guys overall. I think I've said it before, and I maintain that now. Guys like what happens with Jalen and Trey Jones, I think is going to tell a lot about how quick they feel like they can turn these things around if they trade those players off to kind of winning teams and extract some of the value that's there in them. But one of the biggest questions here is who's going to be the head coach, right? Now, when it was Matt Lloyd was considered the front runner, Micah Nori was also considered the front runner for the head coach because they were coming over from that Minnesota Timberwolves organization. Now, I'm going to be clear here. I'm going to give a list of guys. This is not the full list. This is just kind of where my initial thoughts have gone. I'm going to leave off guys like Tibbs. I don't think he's going to come here. I'm leaving off guys like that. I'm going to leave off guys, that I think are already in jobs that may not come out of jobs, right? So those ones. I'm going to stay on Micah Nori here for a second. I do think that Micah Nori still is a candidate here just because he's a good candidate for a head coach regardless. Could he still very well get an interview? It's possible, right? So I don't think that Matt Lloyd being here automatically means that Micah Nori is not on the chart at all. I'm just going to say that it could be a little bit different there in regards to that, right? I still think Micah Nori is somebody who's been around. He's been known as a really good coaching mind. So there's still a chance that, especially when you try to poach from a playoff team, that somebody like Micah Nori could very well still be in consideration for that, right? Another guy that I think could be as well is James Borrego. Could very well be, right? This guy's a experienced guy. He's a relationship plus roster fit type guy that you look at in regards to that one. He is an interim coach with the New Orleans Pelicans, of course. He did serve as the head coach in Charlotte as well. He's a longtime assistant with the Spurs also. And because the Pelicans are already interviewing like guys like Rajon Rondo, I think that means that James Borrego, while he's going to give him a chance to interview, he may not be there, right? I think that Giddey needs a coach who can get those reads down and those type of things. I think that James Borrego is a guy for that. I think that James Borrego also can provide some structured development for guys like Manas Buzelis, Noah Essengay as well in regards to that one. I do think that when you look at his coaching philosophies, there's more cutting, there's more spacing, there's more kind of ball movement in regards to what Billy Donovan's later Chicago Bulls offenses and groups look like in regards to that one. But I do think a knock on him as well is that he's an overall sub 500 head coach. But sometimes coaches don't get it right at the first couple of stops. But I do think James Borrego is another guy that we could kind of expect maybe to be on that short list. Chris Quinn is another guy, right? This is a guy that pops up you guys know, one of my favorite coaching candidates that are out there has been Chris Quinn for years now in regards to it. I think when you look at how Chris Quinn had to fill in for Eric Spoelstra, we've seen some of that in regards to it. Udonis Haslam talked about when Chris Quinn stepped in and the fact that, people were listening to him. He sounds like Spoelstra himself, that he was able to command that respect in that locker room. Now, it's a locker room that he's been in for a while, so you expect him to have that respect there. But I do think that you want somebody who can bring in discipline to the organization. He brings in a culture-building mindset that he's come from that franchise as well. You look at some of his coaching philosophies, ball movement, more handoff, attacking mismatches a little bit more in regards to that one. Defensive adaptability is a big part of Chris Quinn and the coaching philosophies that he likes there as well. I think that he comes and he would bring in kind of that culture that the Chicago Bulls have been missing a little bit. Another guy on the list, Johnny Bryant, right? When you look at from a developmental standpoint, Johnny Bryant is one of those guys that can do that. Cleveland Cavaliers named him as the associate head coach in 2024. And prior to that, he built a reputation in Utah and New York, built on high-end one-on-one development work with staff, working with that development staff, work with the primary ball handlers, right? That type of thing. He's a really good developmental head coach. When you look at it, he has a track record of helping develop players like Donovan Mitchell, Gordon Hayward, Paul Millsap, Damian Lillard, among others, right? I do think he's also one of those guys that talked about elite spacing, right? The importance of respacing and occupying open areas of the court. That way you can attack the defense a little bit more. So I think when you look at the spacing that the Bulls need, especially with Josh Giddey as the point or even getting Manas Buzelis in more space, Johnny Bryant is a guy that can really bring that as well. A lot of you guys like Rajon Rondo as a candidate, and I do too. Johnny Bryant kind of is the guy that brings a lot of that kind of philosophy already, but he's already been a head coaching job. I think his systems are more guard heavy in regards to it, right? And I do think he has, in the half court, he has kind of the more international half court system in regards to his coaching philosophies as well. The pros of him, development, the offensive philosophies in regards to that one, in regards to it as well. I think the first-time head coach thing is just one of the biggest knocks there. But then again, it could be something that, as a young exec himself, Bryson Graham could actually want to instill a full youth movement from top to bottom for the Chicago Bulls. Sam Cassell is another one as well. You look at Sam Cassell, longtime assistant coach around the league, one of the best guys in regards to it. You talk about somebody who's a former player, could bring the culture as well. I think he makes sense because of helping Josh Giddey, as well as when it comes down to it. The late game decision-making by Sam Cassell is also something that he really does. He's going to completely overhaul the scheme as well, right? I think, Borrego and Chris Quinn would do that as well, but I do think when you look at Sam Cassell's coaching philosophies, more pick and roll heavy and base, which is kind of the backbone of all basketball. I do think with that, the cons for him is that, he has a less defined, kind of system than these other coaches, but he's the guy there as well. Another guy that could be talked about is Jamal Mosley. Now, recently fired by the Orlando Magic, this could be looked at as kind of more of a floor setter first, and maybe not the long-term head coach. Here's the thing with Jamal Mosley. Do I think he got a bit of a bad go in Orlando? I think he got blamed for some things that were inherently bad with the roster, but also you can't overlook, at the end of the day, he coached 3 straight winning seasons, which is good, but 3 straight first-round exits. And the Magic's offense in that time has gotten considerably worse. It keeps getting worse. So you have a time in regards to that when the Magic had the worst playoff offense in the entirety of the 16 teams that made the actual playoffs. So take a look at that one when you come. I'm saying in the specific playoffs, it wasn't that bad. I think it was 18th in the regular season, so you got to look at that part as well. Willie Green, there's another guy that's name could be come up as well for the Chicago Bulls. This is a guy that Bryson Graham would know hand in hand in regards to that one, right? Willie Green's early tenure and his ability to connect with players and the philosophy that he brought there, compete, defend, share the ball. That was Willie Green's kind of philosophy there. I do think it's another guy that because of his experience with Bryson Graham could be on there when it comes down to it. I do think that he brings some solid defensive philosophies as well when it comes down to it. But because his familiarity with Bryson Graham, same way with Micah Nori and Matt Lloyd, their experience together could be in regards to that. Now, he has a 150, 190 overall record. That's a huge negative in regards to him. But I think that as a setter and kind of understanding in the evaluation phase before the Bulls are really ready to compete and contend, Willie Green could be a good option. And then I think the option that brings it all together as well is Tiago Splitter. I think that with Bryson Graham's youth, keep getting in another young head coach that just showed everything that he had to deal with in Portland. You know, development we saw there from Scoot, from Denny, from Donovan Clingan. We saw development from all those guys, Shaedon Sharpe. All those guys took a nice step forward under Tiago Splitter last year. And this is a guy that came in and was not expected to be the head coach at all. Took over for Chauncey Billups, who's going to jail. Took over for Chauncey Billups, and then dealt with a head case of an owner as well, and kept it professional, kept his team focused on the task at hand to make it through that play-in. And they won a playoff game. So take that for what you will, right? So at the end of the day, I think I look at it and I say for these teams is that it's fun, right? And I think that the place that these head coaches come, and of course, Rajon Rondo. Rajon Rondo, I think, is also a guy now because he's already interviewed with the Pelicans. Could that be somebody that they already have a leg up in regards to that? Could be, but now that we know that Rajon Rondo is interested in interviewing for head coaching positions, why not bring him in for an interview at least? See what he's going to bring to the table in regards to that. So that's kind of where my list stands. It's not the end all be all list. I do think there are other guys that can get added to this as it goes on. But I think all the coaches that I brought up here bring a level of execution as well as player development and some needed edge that the Chicago Bulls have been missing for a while now. And we'll just see how that works out for this Bulls team overall. But I think that is a good sign. I think that is a sign that some things could work out well for the Chicago Bulls. We just got to see if it's going to come to fruition. So let me know any other head coaching candidates that you want to see covered for that. I know there's been some stuff floated around on, some other, candidates that could pop up in regards to it, and we'll see what happens in regards to that. But, we cover everything. As new things pop up, we'll cover it here at Chicago Bulls Central, as only we can do because we cover everything. So, but that's going to do it for today's episode. Bryson Graham era has officially now begun, and now the real work begins for the Chicago Bulls. This hire is exciting because it represents something different for the Chicago Bulls and a new phase overall. But excitement is not enough. Bryson Graham has to build the front office. He has to identify the right head coach. He has to hit in the draft, has to figure out what the roster is going forward with, free agent decisions this season. And he has to decide how aggressive or patient to be with the Bulls and all this cap space that they have. The Bulls have finally made the first move. Now they have to make the right moves coming up next. And we got to see how that's going to be. So make sure you guys stay locked in with us. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel as well. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. Send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.